Hello, podcast lovers. This is your host with the most, JJ. We're going to talk about episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and Tucker and I have our own Duel of the Fates. Enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
Tucker, I'd like to talk about guilty pleasures.
Hit me.
Okay, so
Not literally.
no, I'm going to hit you right now.
Okay.
Okay,
Guilty
ready?
pleasure of mine's getting hit by you.
I don't think I like the term guilty pleasures, because if something brings you pleasure, why should you have to feel guilty
They're
about
saying
it?
you should not enjoy this.
Right.
Like for me, Super Mario Brothers with Bob Hoskins.
Yes.
Guilty pleasure.
Uh-huh.
I shouldn't enjoy it. I do.
But you do, because you've got some kind of nostalgia attached to it. No big deal.
Brings me back to working at Videoland.
I went to the 25th anniversary screening of episode 1, The Phantom Menace, last night. Sold out, packed house. And I'll tell you a couple things. Number one, I remember seeing this movie when it came out and not being blown away. I mean, the effects for the era were unlike anything we had really ever seen, right? And it opened up Star Wars in this really big way that we hadn't seen, you know, all these different locations. And anyway, I went to it with a friend of mine who was born, I think, like in 2001. I should actually figure it out when he was born, but he's maybe born in like somewhere between 98 and 2001. So he was too young to see this movie when it came out, but it was a movie he watched a bunch as a kid, and this is his favorite Star Wars movie. And that makes me sick to my stomach that that's his favorite. And so
It's a whole generation's favorite.
it is. And so I went to it last night, and I will say this. I did enjoy aspects of it more than I did the last time. I think seeing it on a big screen and seeing it with a crowd makes a difference.
The saber fight on the big screen
Is so good,
pretty
right?
sweet, especially once it's one-on-one with Maul and Obi-Wan.
Now, here's an interesting fact for you about that. So if you remember correctly, at one point, Maul knocks over Obi-Wan and his lightsaber goes clinking down the big like tunnel. Star Wars full of a lot of these open shafts in all the movies.
No
Open
worker safety
shafts.
whatsoever.
No. And Obi-Wan like holds on to like a light that's jutting out from the side.
Yeah.
And it's after this amazing fight because Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul are going at it, and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul are going, you know, like boom, duel of the fates. And the end of that fight is Obi-Wan just kind of like pulls himself up, force grabs Qui-Gon's saber, and like cuts Darth Maul in half. But it happens so quickly, even Darth Maul is a little surprised. He goes like, this is the ending? And then he falls down the open shaft. I think that they could have done a little bit more because the choreography is so good rather than just a one swipe and he's done.
I wonder how much Lee Pace got paid for like the 2 lines he recorded as Darth Maul.
I bet you a lot.
I bet a lot.
And actually, Darth Maul talks a lot more than I thought he did. I always thought I was like, well, he's silent, right?
He has one scene, I think, where he speaks.
He's got a couple. So he's always talking to the Emperor. He always has like, he's got lines back and forth. So there's the one where he and the Emperor are walking down like a thing like in Coruscant, and he's got like a back and forth. Like there's like more than just like,
Soon
what are we
going to have our revenge against the
right,
Jedi.
exactly. Then there's another conversation that they have later on. Really? Yeah, and I'm
trying to remember what that is.
Right. See, here's the thing. None of them make any point, and he's actually less menacing when he speaks than when he is silent, right? Because the makeup on it is so good, right? So So yeah, here's some things I took away from the 25th anniversary.
I think he only talks once.
No, I just saw it last night. I'm telling you, Darth Maul has more than one scene where he speaks.
Okay.
And then beyond that, also just so everyone knows, Tucker's looking it up on his phone right now.
I've seen episode 1 probably 100 times.
God, you're just going to embarrass yourself now.
So I'm trying to find out. Okay, what am I forgetting? What's the scene that I'm forgetting?
So much of that movie.
Do you
is
remember what the scene is that I'm forgetting? Because I remember him talking to the Emperor. He has like the 1-2 lines, and then I'm trying to remember him speaking ever again after.
Yeah, he's got another dialogue set and like again I don't remember him talking once, and so hearing that again I was like, oh shit, I forgot that Darth Maul like has a voice at one point. I watched and I came up with something that I had never seen before, like in my mind, that hadn't like gone in my mind. So Palpatine is from Naboo. Mm-hmm. That's why he's having the war on Naboo, because he's the senator, and this will allow him like to, overthrow power.
Yeah. I
always just thought he was a senator who was like, I'm going to help out these guys. These like little startups from Naboo. These guys are nice. We're going to bring him up into the situation here. Also, this drives me nuts. When they
I think I'm right, by the way.
I know you're not.
Well, you need to tell me then what the second scene is that he speaks.
Okay, hold on. We're going to suspend this right now. So we're going to take a pause, and I will show you.
Okay. So it turns out JJ was wrong.
A brief hiatus.
It was only one scene.
Turns out I was so right.
No, he was right.
Turns out I was right. But again, it's so inconsequential and matters so little that why even have him speak again?
Right. And I've seen the movie like 100 times, and I couldn't remember that part. I can only remember when it's him and they're walking and we shall have a revenge against the Jedi or whatever. So for basically 4 lines, I think he has in the whole thing.
By the way, just in case you're playing along at home, the scene takes place on Naboo, and he's having like a back and forth conversation with the Emperor. Well, at that point, just the Darth Sidious, who also is Senator Palpatine at the time, and he responds with "Yes, my master."
Yeah,
because I think it was really important that we kept honing in that he was the master, not the apprentice.
God, I'm thinking back to all of because I remember the behind the scenes documentary of making Phantom Menace, and all of the moments where you'd see George Lucas like, I really want it to be like this, and you'd be like, why though? Like, why do you need that? Yeah. And I remember one like him sitting with Ben Burt, the editor, in like a scene where someone's in a cockpit, and they're trying to like match. Like combine 2 shots into one, but they don't. It's just like this guy's saying, "Hey, look, Tatooine." Like it's just like that. It's something super stupid and small, and they just spend all this time on it. So yeah,
I think like okay. So here are my walkaways from this movie that changed my opinion slightly of it. I still don't think that as a movie it's great, but it does something. It follows the Star Wars script of. This battle for good versus evil has been going on for thousands of years, but let me show you the 4 days that really count, right?
Yeah.
Because that's sort of what Star Wars is built on. Not these long, drawn-out generations, but, we're going to go to Jabba's palace, we're going to sleep one night, and then we're going to go to the Death Star 2, and then we're done.
Yep.
Right. Which is one of the reasons I think I like Rogue One so much, because they give you that opening scene when she's a little girl and then, time passes. I just get a kick out of that. It's so incredibly clear while watching this one that they made it for a younger audience, right? Like anything that the Gungans do, Boss Nass having his spitty.
I mean, Jar Jar gets farted in his face.
Yeah, by bantha.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, which is just... And the Jar Jar thing doesn't bother me as much as I think it bothered people when the movie first came out, because I can just look past it. Here's something that we need. Where did R2-D2 come from? What's his origin story?
Yeah.
Because he just is on that Naboo starfighter when they take off and they get hit in the warp drive.
And he's got what I've ever since then have called R2-D2 lines, where a character announces another character with the knowledge that the audience is going to go...
Yep.
And so when they're like, what is this droid unit, this very brave droid unit? And he's like, R2-D2, Your Highness. And the audience goes, woo!
As if we didn't know already, right?
I fucking hate that shit.
I think Yoda does it for Chewbacca.
Yeah.
Like, Chewbacca.
Yeah, where you can tell, and sometimes it's not even a line. Sometimes it's a moment, but it can fall flat in so many. I think of the first Wolverine prequel, right? X-Men Origins Wolverine. And they we got to come up with a reason why he gets this motorcycle jacket. I was like, no, you don't. It's like, yeah, but we had to have this scene where he's at a farm, and then they're like, oh, hey, you can have this jacket. It's an old one of mine. And then he's supposed to put it on and look in the mirror, and we're all supposed to be like, oh my God, that's the jacket that we saw him in another one. That's an absolute dog shit R2-D2 scene.
It is, right?
It really is.
And it's fan service that you don't need, because in fact, you're actually rewarding. You think you're rewarding the fans, but you're actually rewarding the people who are seeing this movie for the first time ever, who are like, oh, that's how he got his jacket. And that's one of the things that bothers me. And episode 1 Phantom Menace does that a lot, where they're like, listen, we didn't make this for fans of Star Wars. We made this to bring in new generations of fans.
So we could sell them toys.
Yeah.
And sell them Taco Bell things.
And Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and what's the other one that's part of Yum Brands? KFC.
Because I just saw on the found footage channel, they released an old promo from that time. Because I remember, God, that was 98, 97, 98. It released summer of 98 at the end of my 7th grade year, I think. And I just remember, Taco Bell, it was everywhere. And I even remember them going all right, now we're going to do an interview with NSYNC. What'd you guys think of the new Star Wars movie? Best Star Wars movie ever, right? That
and you're you haven't even seen the originals, you idiots.
This is making me think of that amazing Patton Oswalt bit about George Lucas going you want to see him when he's a little kid?
Yeah, you're like Darth Vader? Oh, yeah, I love Darth Vader. In this, he's a little kid. He's very sad. You like Boba Fett?
There are...
You like Angelina Jolie? Here's John Voight's ballsack.
I will say... The Phantom Menace of the prequels is my favorite prequel film.
Yeah?
Yeah. Of the 3, it offends me the least. I don't know why that is necessarily. I think part of it, I love that lightsaber battle.
Yeah.
That was something that we had just never seen before.
Even the open, because you don't get as much lightsaber play as you think you do in the original 3.
Right. Yeah.
It's there, but it is not what they do in this. These full choreographed. You watch that first Darth and Obi-Wan fight in A New Hope, and you're like, I remember this being really epic, and they just clash
yeah, I think for 1975 it was kind of epic, but
yeah, right
at that time,
because they didn't know what glow swords were going to be like at that point. And so you get that, not only that, but you get them using lightsabers in other ways, right? So when Qui-Gon Jinn is cutting open the blast doors, and he just inserts it to melt the steel. Yeah, it's a great lightsaber moment. You also get a lot of them using the Force, which is always nice too. So
I did love though the Red Letter Media reviews where they're pointing out the times where, man, that Force power would have been really helpful right about now. Yeah. Why did you not use it? Obi-Wan trying to get to Qui-Gon through those blast doors before he can.
Why not force the blast doors open?
Or do the Force run you guys did when you were running away from the destroyers or whatever they're called. Yeah, it's weird, but I have so many good memories though from that summer, because that was my first summer taking video production at Trollwood. Oh, so I vividly remember day one, us all sitting around with Greg Carlson and him hey, what movies do you guys like? And we're talking, and then we're all talking about how much we all love The Phantom Menace. It's so good. I've seen it 8 times, that lightsaber battle. And he just sat there and was like, yes. Yep. And then years later had to tell me that, I couldn't rain on you guys' parade at all. You were so happy, and I didn't want to be that guy.
Isn't that nice?
That is very nice of him.
And I felt that way with Madison, because he had never seen it on the big screen. And so here he was experiencing on the big screen. He's like, so what'd you think? And I was like, you know what? I don't hate it as much as I thought I did.
What are his feelings on Jar Jar?
I think that he now with more of an adult eye was kind of okay, it's embarrassing because I think he still likes Jar Jar, right? And so, but he's embarrassed because he knows, even with his adult angle on it, he knows that this is a horrible, crappy character, but he likes the fact that he does all this stuff. Also, do they do the Vulcan nerve pinch So this is something I never caught either. When they're in the ship going through the planet core, at one point, like Jar Jar keeps like freaking out inside this like big goober fish, and Qui-Gon like pinches his shoulder, and then he goes, oh, and then he passes out.
Okay.
And so I was like, wait a minute. Did you Vulcan nerve pinch this guy? Are we full on going into that? Also, we are to assume that this is actually part of, like, it's a galaxy far, far away, but it's actually part of our galaxy. Like, human beings exist somewhere because you, at one point in the Galactic Senate, one of the planets represented is the ET planet, which at one point comes to Earth.
Yeah, it's unknown what era it would be because they refer to it as a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So those delegates could be, a couple hundred years prior to ET or something like that, maybe a couple thousand years prior to ET. But clearly they have the space travel capability to get to Earth for sure.
So
and they're only ever talking about the galaxy, right?
Yeah.
So they never leave the galaxy.
So here's the thing. I have a theory that...
Oh, no, it's in a galaxy far,
far away. Yeah.
Okay. So they are able to leave the galaxy and come here to this galaxy.
And like they mention multiple galaxies, like the galaxy, like there's systems within this galaxy, but it sounds like they're able to like get here. And here's the thing that's messed up. So the ET delegates are there, right? But then in the movie ET, which now is part of that universe, they dress ET up as Yoda.
Yep.
For Halloween. So there's a lot going on there that we need to really unpack. Like that's where the nerds should go. Speaking of the nerds, one of the most disgusting smelling movie theaters I've ever been in. I counted 5 different people who took their shoes off.
Gross.
And there was a guy in front of me who is the quintessential nerd. He's got greasy, curly hair, big, thick glasses, jowls for days. He's sitting there and he starts like texting while the opening crawl is going on. I'm like, okay, I'll give him that. But like, so the movie's going, he keeps texting. And so I lean forward and I'm like, hey, could you please turn off that cell phone? And he goes, Pugh. And he turns the brightness down on it. And then I was like, I don't feel like getting into a fight with a nerd right now because there's people dressed as Mandalorians and stuff. And like, I don't want to be part of that news story where, it's like, it's local talk show host gets into fight with nerds at movie theater.
That's making me think again when the release of episode 1 came out. First of all, the Triumph the Insult comic dog.
Oh, so good. Which one
the
of these
best one ever
calls your mother to pick you up?
The best Triumph one absolutely ever. But then also just the footage of like the people were so revved up. Like they're fighting with their lightsabers in the theater, like waiting for the movie to start. I can't remember the last time I would have felt that level of jazzed up for a movie was Endgame.
Me too.
Yeah.
Like that was the last time I remember people getting fully dressed up and like when I saw Revenge of the Sith, I remember like the poor theater usher having to come in and being like, and if we could all please turn off our lightsabers. Now that was one of the coolest experiences because it was Revenge of the Sith. I had never seen interlocking before done with projection.
Oh,
and I think Dana brought us up, right?
I haven't seen it, but I'd heard about it.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure Dana brought us up brought me up to the projection booth, and so they had like 5 prints of the movie, but in an effort to, because they could start showing the movie at like 7 p.m. That was the very earliest you could actually screen the movie, and so you can't have like 5 projectors that you fire all at the same time and be able to make it work. But they use every screen at Century. So what do? You do this thing called interlocking, where essentially you run a piece of guide film through one projector that leads into the other projector that leads into the other projector. And you have to actually start them all at the exact same time so that the tension is created and it goes through all of these things at the same time. It is, when you're putting it together, like as a projectionist, it makes you poop your pants.
I would never, ever want to deal with that.
And we're talking about by the time you get to the final projector, you're maybe only like 20 seconds tops behind where the other ones are. But you are talking about miles of film to get there. It is and so like he had shown me how it was all there, and he had rigged up these little like spool systems like that were hanging from the ceiling so that if the film started to lose tension, it could drop down but not hit the ground before it went to it was crazy.
That's wild. That's absolutely wild. I wonder if I could just remember how to spool up a 35 millimeter projector, because I haven't done it since I worked at the Fargo Theater. I think that was 2007.
Yeah.
Last time I ever did it. I've threaded up 16 mil since then a number of times, but God, I wonder. I that is the thing I do miss, is it is fun to interact with that projector so long as there's no tension on you for like having to get this right for a paying audience.
Yeah.
Because that is the thing that is really, really tense.
Well, and that projector was so old at that point. Like even the more modern projectors that they had, it was just a feed system.
Yep.
Like you just lined it up, and as long as you got in the first part, it fed through the rest of the system. So you'd never have to, this is an era where you're opening a little door to get in there so that you can make your loop just big enough, but not too big, and so it's definitely an art form to work with it. And just think, I don't think that there's more than maybe a handful of theaters in the country now that are still other than like IMAX that have an actual projection system that uses celluloid.
Does Fargo still have one? Fargo Theater?
I haven't been up in that booth in a long time, but I know that they're not using it.
Okay.
If they are, it must be extremely rare, because even studios stopped sending out prints.
Yeah, I thought I remember hearing that they had moved it to the smaller screen at one point, but I don't know. I really don't know, because how often are they actually showing anything on film?
So what's the point in keeping it? Keeping it well oiled.
Sure.
And everything.
If anything, they should move it out to be a display.
Yeah.
Right. So that at a minimum, or have a way to go and visit it as a display. Maybe it's always set up and functional, but then between movies you can go, hey, tours can come and take a look at it, just like we have the Wurlitzer, right? Yeah.
There's a movie theater in Nome, North Dakota. And the city of Nome, I think, has maybe like 10 people as its population. And recently their schoolhouse was purchased by some women who want to do fiber arts. And so they keep llamas on the premises, and they shear the llamas, and then they've got this huge system where they actually take the llama wool and spin it into string and yarn and stuff like that. They had to buy it from like Germany, and it came over in 9 different chunks, this machine. And then upstairs they teach classes and have retreats, and they have a restaurant. It's a really unique thing that they've done with this schoolhouse. It's really, really awesome. But when they bought the schoolhouse, which was dilapidated and falling apart, the town was like, well, we'll also give you our movie theater too. And so
2 for 1,
right? So I was taking a tour of it one day, and they're like, oh, we also own the movie theater. Would you like to see that? And I'm like, yeah. And they used a bunch of the flooring from the movie theater, which is a 1-screen movie house, to redo the flooring there, because it was age appropriate, right? Like 100-year-old flooring. Well, I went up to the projection booth while I was there, right? Which you had to walk like up this ladder. Like it was precarious to get up to it, but a full arc light projector just sitting there. And there's a bunch of film that was up there still. And they even had like the arc light, like they're not pegs, but like whatever made the electricity that would like melt down.
Yeah, like the spark plug basically, or something.
And then you just have to replace. So they had a big box full of like those that were still up there. And I said, there's actually people out there that would pay big money because it's sat there.
Yeah.
Right. It's not missing pieces. It's not like a bunch of people have spray painted it. It's just sitting there. You'd have to tear down part of the exterior wall to get it out, I think.
I wonder how much that would go for.
I bet you that there's people out there that would pay a pretty penny for it. Or at the very least, depending on how great it is, like in preservation, I bet you like the Academy Museum, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Museum would probably take it or restore it.
I don't know what ended up happening to the film collection that was owned by Ted Larson and Rusty Castleton. I don't know. I know it ended up being in Rusty's possession, and then after he passed away, I don't know if his wife sold it or donated it or still holds on to it, but we used to have a massive collection here in the area, private collection.
Yeah, I feel
35.
like the National Archives even would request stuff, and they're like, listen, we're trying to get a hold of this print. Do you have one?
Yeah.
which I think is pretty friggin' awesome.
And someday they're gonna be like, "Hey, does anyone have the VHS of Jurassic Park? We could really use one." I'm like, "Do you want a widescreen?"
Here's the special edition one that came with a figurine, no figurine attached.
I got really excited when I found that Big Bird in China goes to China.
Big Bird goes to China.
Big Bird goes to China VHS. Just because that's one I've never seen. That
was a huge deal because it was actually part of how like the U.S. Chinese relationship was trying to be restored, and how, you know, like we respect each other's cultures and pieces like that. And it's not the first time that they've turned to Hollywood to do that. The U.S. asked Walt Disney to like help with their relations with South America. And so like that's where the Three Caballeros comes from. And he made a bunch of videos in South America that he then aired showing about the beauty and the culture and all these things. It's very fascinating how the United States government knows that they're not great storytellers. They've read IRS, documentation too. And so they're like, we got to go and find someone.
Did you guys read the new issue of IRS? Oof, it's really dry.
Because you've never been to the Lincoln Museum, right? The Lincoln Library?
No.
Okay, so in Springfield, Illinois is the Abraham Lincoln Library.
I would love to go there, though.
And do you know who curated it? Motherfucking Walt Disney.
No shit.
Yeah. And so
he's a big Lincoln guy.
He was a huge Lincoln guy. And so when you walk through it, it's like walking through there's giant set pieces of like, Lincoln giving a speech and full size models and everything like that. And you walk through it and you feel like you're walking through Main Street, USA when you go to Disney World. It is fascinating. Ooh. And so I'm told that like other presidential libraries just don't really hold a candle quite. They may be big and impressive, but they just don't have what the Lincoln one does. I could go back to that and spend 2 days because you're just never going to see everything. And like all the nuances that they add to it are just amazing.
It's been a long time since I've dove into Lincoln lore.
You do. You were a man who, like, I think I brought you something back from the Lincoln Museum when I went there, like a little tiny bust or something like that at one point.
Have you ever read the book? I think it's called Manhunt.
Oh, I have not. But you know what? It's one of those things where that was they wanted to turn that into a movie for a long time.
Didn't they? I thought they did with Harrison Ford.
Did they finally make it?
I thought they did at one point, but I could be misremembering that. But that book is fantastic. That is a fantastic book, and it makes you feel like you're there. It's crazy, like how it makes you feel like you're there.
John Wilkes Booth is one of those interesting stories where, like we all assume like, oh, well, he shot the president and then they found him, like 20 minutes later in that barn. But like it was a nationwide manhunt.
They shot him through the boards, through his throat, and the guy who shot him cut his own dick off later on.
Cut off
his own dick.
Oh.
The guy who shot him and got some fame for it was insane.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
So it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going.
Fucking going.
That is crazy.
But it breaks down because the night that Lincoln was assassinated, that was one of 3 attacks that happened that night against people in his administration. And I'm blanking on the names of the other 2, but one guy almost died. He got knifed a bunch of times in the throat and in the mouth and was able to survive it. And I think his vice president was supposed to be attacked as well, but that like didn't work out, or they attempted it or something like that. So there were supposed to be 3 assassinations that evening, but. Yeah, I also know, I remember Mama Luke telling me we had some family connection to it in some way. I've never really looked this up, but she used to tell me a story about how it was someone we were related to that rented the horse to Booth that he got away on. Something along those lines, a Pumphrey or a Pendleton or something like that. I've never dove into that story a bit, but it's ended up testifying at the conspirator trial, because obviously they couldn't put Booth on trial, but they put all the conspirators on trial. Sure. And
there's a great musical called Assassins. Mm-hmm. And it's a musical that details all of the assassination attempts, both the ones that worked out and the ones that didn't, of U.S. presidents. And it's told through song and dance. And they had a revival in the early 2000s, I think. And Doogie Howser, himself played like the narrator, and the Ballad of Booth is one of the best. You know, it's like Johnny Booth was a handsome devil.
He was famous. I mean, he was a famous actor.
He was a huge actor.
He was essentially like the George Clooney of his time. Everyone knew who he was.
Which is, I believe, one of the aspects that allowed him to get access into the theater so easily that night, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's an interesting story. I should read that book. I've been looking for a book to read. In fact, in our next episode, I'm going to talk about a couple of books that I've read recently. This is called a tease, and I can only do this because we're recording them back to back, and I know exactly what I'm going to do. But I wanted to finish this conversation about guilty pleasures because I have an ultimate guilty pleasure when it comes to film. It's called Disorderlies, and it's a movie that came out to allow the rap trio the Fat Boys to have a motion picture. This is the premise of Disorderlies. A young man, his uncle is ultra rich, but he's very infirmed, and he essentially wants his uncle to die by mismanagement of his care so that he can inherit all the money because he owes some money to some pretty bad people. So he decides what I'm going to do is I'm going to get him the worst care in America. So he finds the worst nursing home and finds that these three guys, the Fat Boys, who are really large men. Like, these are big boys, right? They call themselves the Fat Boys for a reason. And they had a collaboration with the Beach Boys at one point. But he hires them to come in and they don't know anything, but inadvertently they do things like they play poker and they need chips, but they use his pills instead. And so they mess up all of his pills. So they stop giving him his pills. Well, it turns out this guy's been like paying off the doctors to essentially keep him sedated. So once he gets rid of these pills, he's, got a little more pep. They take him out to a roller skate nightclub where Laura Hunter herself performs Work Me Down, Work Me Down, Down, Work Me Down, Down. And he has fun and he realizes that there's a lot of life to live yet. So he just, these guys essentially save Albert's life by telling him like, hey, listen, you're going to have some fun. Meanwhile, the guy, I was like, I'm just going to kill him, right? Like, I'm going to kill my uncle. And so they accidentally thwart all of the uncle. There's a really off-putting Peeping Tom scene that feels like in 2024.
There's a lot of those.
But I watched this movie a ton because TBS had the rights to it for, I'm going to say 20 years. And so they'd be like, well, we don't have anything to put after the Timberwolves game. They're like, Disorderlies. And so I watched a bunch. It's also, there's a music video sequence called Baby You're a Rich Man, where they talk about like rich people at the end. They're like, baby, you're a rich man. You're a rich man too. And they're like, a Bill Cosby, a Jackie Gleason, and, Tina Turner. And they talk about all these really wealthy people. And I'm like, well, most of them are dead or behind bars now because this just didn't age well anymore. But the movie Disorderlies is so bad that it's good to me. Ralph Bellamy, I believe, is the name of the actor who plays Albert, the old man. And if you're a fan of like Trading Places, he's in that movie. He's one of the brothers that tries to screw over, or that successfully does screw over both Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd.
Just the fact that you mentioned, was it TBS you said?
Yeah.
That kicked off such a nostalgia wave in my head for a period of time where access to media wasn't super easy, right? Like,
right.
You had to find if it was playing on TV at a certain time, or you had to go rent a tape if there was a tape in town. And that's about it. Like that, those are the options that you had. And, gosh, I'm surprised at how nostalgic, because I've actually never seen the Fat Boys. I've never seen that movie, so I have no memories of it. But the idea of the Turner Classic Movies coming on or something, or Sunday morning movie of the week, this is the best time to catch it. It makes me wish I was around when Z Channel was a thing.
Mm-hmm. You'd love like the VHS art to Disorderlies because Albert is in a wheelchair and he's looking at you going, "Oh no!" And the Fat Boys are all pushing the wheelchair and it's popping a wheelie.
So
like they're having a great
something
time.
I should be on the lookout for you for.
Oh, I have a copy of Disorderlies, but thank you very much. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. Turns out there's also a deleted scene where Darth Maul goes in and he's trying to order a sandwich and no one will help him at the counter. And so finally he freaks out and he cuts the sandwich in half and someone goes, I think he invented the hoagie.